I want to get to an issue that has captured New Yorkers' attention, and that is President Obama's insertion of his opinion into the gubernatorial race in New York. Basically, it's been reported by the New York Times that Obama's political advisors have spoken to New York Governor David Paterson and told him to get out of the gubernatorial race. Is that appropriate for a president to do?
I don't know that to be a fact. I do think these are very difficult decisions. He's the President of the United States. He's the titular leader of the party. He's entitled to have his own opinion. I think that both sides probably regret that if the opinion was expressed in that fashion that was leaked. And at the end of the day, I got to stand with the Governor Paterson. It's his job now, and if he wants to run for it, he's got to weigh all those considerations. The president's entitled to opinion, but Governor Paterson ought to do what he feels in the best interest of New Yorkers.
Are you concerned that by announcing that you might challenge Senator Gillibrand, that you might draw the ire of Senator Chuck Schumer, who clearly seemed to be a proponent of her and is a proponent of her right now?
Well, first of all, I'm in the exploratory stage.
Your father was convicted in 2001 of bank fraud. Is that a fair question for people to ask?
That's absolutely fair. And if people want to attack my father, that's certainly fine. They've already done so. They've been doing so for years. Nonetheless, I'm running on my record, and I'm proud to be an immigrant to this country. I got here when I was 5 years old.
I want to talk about 311 because this month the New York Post ran a story that suggested that you took credit for creating New York City's telephone hotline 311. And Al Gore was famously ridiculed for saying he invented the internet. Would it be wise to maybe back off that claim?
Absolutely not. My source is Mike Bloomberg, who did it. That the New York Post, with all due respect to the New York Post, has a little item from my opponent saying Green said that he advocated, pushed for 311 in New York City is true. And that my opponents don't like it is of no concern to me.
And what about opening up Albany, basically putting more transparency in Albany? Because one of the things that I think a lot of people are not aware of is some of the committees, particularly in the New York Senate, that they really are not debating. Some of them only meet twice a year. So when a bill comes to the floor, you're not getting that kind of debate.
It's absurd.
I want to get back to something, a very interesting charge that you make in the book. I want to read to you something from the book jacket, which says, and I'm going to quote, "The pressure that the Department of Homeland Security received to connect Homeland Security to the international war on terror, Red Iraq, and to raise a security alert on the eve of the 2004 presidential election. Yet previously you've made comments, particularly to the New York Times, that politics did not play a role whatsoever in Homeland Security decisions. So can you clear up this apparent contradiction?
Yeah, there's a contradiction between the words on the jacket cover, which I'm not quite comfortable with the words that I actually wrote. And I try to tell people to just read the words that I wrote in the book.
Do you think because 311 has been so effective for the city and has really cut through the red tape and bureaucracy that maybe diminishes the need for a public advocate?
I asked Betsy Gottham about this, and she's been in office since 311 took effect. She said that public advocate is getting, on average, the same number of complaints, 12,000 a year, because 311 distributes people to get information, but they don't have ombudsmen actually solving a complaint.
And I just want to read you a statistic, because obviously New York is the only city in America that's been attacked twice by terrorists. But the entire state of Montana receives $9.07 per person for Fire Act funds, fire department funding, as you know, while New York City only receives 9 cents per person. Is this logical?
You know, you sound like my friend Mayor Bloomberg.
Let's talk a little bit about Albany, because you were in Albany for 13 years, and right now the spotlight in New York State, it's really on Albany and some of the sagas there, particularly with the MTA and the issue of the mayor's control of the public schools. I want to read you a quote that Senate Majority Leader Malcolm Smith said yesterday in talking about his slim Democratic control. He said, "It's not about merit. It's just about what gets us with the votes that we need to get it passed." What do you think he's saying there? I mean, he's basically saying that in order to get the 32 votes he needs, it's not about whether it's about merit that any particular legislator might demand.
I think what he was talking about, which is something I happen to think is true, there's an illusion that the Democrats control the state Senate. I mean, they do to a certain extent, and I give the Senate Democrats great credit with the Rockefeller drug law passage in particular. I thought that day would never come. But the reality is you've got 3 or 4 senators who are playing both sides, but they're getting the best deals that they can get. And basically, they've contributed to this Albany dysfunction. The reality is that there is not a clear majority in the state Senate.
If you had been given that kind of communication from the city president when you were governor, how would you have reacted?
Well, let me put it in a different context. There were many people who I talked with, not many, a couple of people who I talked with right after I got the phone call from President Bush asking me to come to Washington and said, this is a bad idea, you shouldn't do it. So you listen, you hear, you respect their opinions, and you do what you think is the right thing to do. It's real simple. Just follow your own heart and your own head.